Good morning, everyone. Welcome to UMBC's presentation today for all the world to hear, stories from the struggle for civil rights and oral history performance. I'm Sandra Abbott, Curator of Collections and Outreach for the Center for Art, Design, and Visual Culture at UMBC, and today we bring you this performance as part of our outreach programming, which will start in just a few minutes. But if you'll bear with me, I just need to recognize a few of our supporters, participants, and our hosts. First, I'd like to thank UMBC and the CADVC Advisory Board, all our students, and the entire CADV staff, especially the Executive Director, Sims Gardner, who's been a staunch supporter of this project from the beginning. I also want to thank the Music Department, especially Dr. Edwin Richards, Connie Bailey, Susan Velli, Alan Wanneberger, and all of his staff, including his head tech, Henry, and those helping with the AV today and the recordings. Thank you. I also would like to thank the office of the Dean and Dr. Dean John Jeffries, College of Arts and Humanities and Social Sciences, and the Maryland State Arts Council for their general support. Next, I want to thank all of our performers and the CADVC students who worked on this project since last September, including Kate Edwards and my graduate research assistants, Carrie Reynolds, Mika Gentis, Victor Torres, Lexi Mountain, and Kata Frederick. And I'd like to also thank my assistant, Melanie Feaster. I also need to thank my partner and collaborator, the oral historian, dramaturg, and the director of this performance, Harriet Lynn, who I will introduce to you in just a moment. But first, I have to say that this project was made possible by a major grant from the Maryland Humanities Council, through support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, and that any views, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this program do not necessarily represent those of the National Endowment of the Humanities or the Maryland Humanities Council. Now, today's project, For All the World to Hear, was inspired by the CADVC organized traveling exhibition and book, For All the World to See, Visual Culture and the Struggle for Civil Rights, which is on sale and on exhibit in CADVC's gallery just down the hallway through March 10th. We have more information about the exhibition on our website at cadvc.org, or you can just stop by the gallery just down the hallway and see us if you have any other questions. Aside from gallery exhibitions and publications, CADVC consistently runs vigorous K through 14 educational outreach programming with a focus on senior high schools. Well, this special outreach project turns that model on its head. Now we're engaging the senior adult community instead of the usual senior high school community, so we're honored to do so. If you'd like to learn more about our educational outreach projects or how you can participate as a student, a faculty member, or a Baltimore community member, please don't hesitate to contact the gallery anytime. Before I turn it over to my esteemed partner and collaborator on this program, I'd like to introduce her properly. Ms. Harriet Lynn is the founder, producer, and artistic director of Heritage Theater Artists Consortium since 1994. And she's a longtime professional performing artist, choreographer, dancer, playwright, oral historian, and arts administrator and educator. For more information about Ms. Lynn and the cast members, please refer to your programs. And without further ado, I give you For All the World to Hear and Ms. Harriet Lynn.
Good morning. Good morning. I am so glad we are here today, and it's very exciting. We started this program, I think Sandra might have told you, back in September, and this is extremely important to us to be here today so our cast tells their stories. There are a couple of things I do want to say in case we forgot to mention. There's no recording. We are recording this program today. No electronics, things of that. Please turn those off and your cell phones. I so appreciate that. I want you to notice too, of course, these fantastic images. And one of our people in our cast, Mr. Robert Houston, is the photographer, and he's going to share about his story. And so all but the one photograph are his that he has kindly lent for us for this performance. There's also, because we're talking photography, there is some moment in our program where we use flash. So I'm just giving you a heads up on that. And there's another thing, too. We have been doing this program now And I think the enthusiasm is that everybody wants to applaud after each story. It's like a spontaneous reaction. But we do ask you, for the expedience of this program, to just wait until the end so you can really applaud everyone at once, if you'd be so kind. Now, today, there are two people who started with us, and because, unfortunately, they're not able to be here today, it's important that we honor them as well. Their stories are very important, and we have two chairs, you will notice, one here and one there, that represent Mr. John Brown and Barbara Redfern. We're here about the stories. And so there are thousands upon thousands of stories that aren't always told, and you can't even imagine how many stories aren't in our program today, but you will be able to see them through the website. But I wanted to tell you first a little bit about Mr. John Brown. John Brown grew up in the Midwest, Indiana, and even though at that time, during the time of the Depression, there wasn't necessarily a lot of what they would say then people of color who lived in his area, but he was developing a consciousness about what was right and what was wrong. Now, he grew up actually going to many different schools, became a professor of history of religion and also a minister, and he graduated Johns Hopkins, where some of you may know that Chaplain Wickwire, who was very involved in the civil rights movement here in this area, he worked under. So he was developing this frame of reference and how he should be conducting himself and, again, what was right and wrong. So here he was, now one of his very first jobs in Jenkinstown, Pennsylvania. Small town, and it was the time of what was known as the March from Selma to Montgomery in Alabama, deep in the South. And they wanted to be represented there. They wanted solidarity, like so many people from different churches and synagogues beyond the African American community would come together to support this important movement in our country. So, with much trepidation, and they asked John to represent, he went down with another African-American minister from another church to be there in March 1965. And John was so kind to share something about that day. I wanted to share just something with you that he wrote at that time. Martin Luther King was the last speaker, the climax, the leader. Before he spoke, however, the Honorable Ralph Bunche, Undersecretary of the United Nations, and like King, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, stood before the mass of marchers, ministers, movie actors, laborers, students, and citizenry to shout, "By God, we're here. I'm here because I belong here. I'm here because I am an American. I'm here because I am an American with a conscience. I came here to identify with the just cause of the right. No American can ever be an outsider anywhere in the nation." Sometime between 2 and 3 p.m., the leader, Martin Luther King, arose to speak. He had not remained on that platform throughout the previous speeches. There was unspoken fear that he might be assassinated. No chances were being taken. And now, my pleasure to introduce you to the cast of For All the World to Hear.
Hello, my name is Lou Coleman. I was born in 1927 in a small town in Indiana. 2 years later, the Great Depression hit. It was a terrible time for everyone. People out of work, people going hungry. My family, my parents and my 2 brothers and I would have gone hungry if it hadn't been for our relatives who were farmers who brought us food. So as I say, it was an awful time for everyone. Now, when I got old enough to go to school, the bright part of my life was school. I loved school. I did well. I loved most all of my teachers. It was great. The years went by. Finally, I'm a senior, and I had done well, gotten good grades, but we were poor. We were so poor, we were white trash. And everybody knows that white trash just don't have many brains. I was told, in spite of the fact that I was in the Honor Society, that I wasn't smart enough to go to college. Well, I was just too dumb to listen to that advice. So I did go to college, and I think not bad for stupid white trash. I have 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree. But the most important thing that I learned was, don't be put down by negative evaluations.
Being poor is a state of mind. Being broke is a temporary inconvenience. My name is Robert Houston. Years ago, when I was approximately 8, maybe 9 years old, my mother decided to take me shopping with her. We went to a major department store in downtown Baltimore, down around the Lexington Howard Street corridor. I don't remember the name of the store, but I remembered the windows on one of the main streets, because they always had it decorated very pretty during the Christmas holiday. My mother was looking for a Sunday hat. As we entered the store, we were met by a white female sales lady. She took my mother into the hat department. My mother picked out a hat. The sales clerk picked up the hat with one hand, and in the other hand, she had a handful of tissue paper. My mother looked at me, I looked at Mom, and I could see the hurt, the pain, the anguish in her face, and I could physically hear my mother say,
"Be strong, my son, be strong."
My eyes started to get misty, as did my Mom's. She didn't buy the hat that day. We just went home.
Shalom, my name is Janice Grant. In 1942, I was 9 years old, and I went to Virginia with my grandmother and her second husband. My grandmother was blind due to a skating accident in Philly, and she had been given an infected needle that caused her blindness. We boarded the train in Aberdeen, Maryland, and we were sitting in the coach. When we got to Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America, we were escorted to the baggage car behind the coal car at that time, with soot and whatnot coming back on you. And we all had to sit on luggage, including my blind grandmother. We reached Virginia, and on the return trip, we also were in the baggage coach. And then when we got again to Washington, D.C., we were allowed to go into a coach to go home.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deryck Charles, and I came to the civil rights movement kind of a roundabout way. As a 5-year-old kid in South Africa, on New Year's Day, I was running behind a convertible driven by the Oppenheimers. They own the diamond mines in South Africa. And they would throw out coins from the back of their car while driving down Kaiser Street, the main street in Johannesburg. They throw coins out for us native kids to pick up, which I did, of course. At the end of the parade, I found one side of a roller skate. In those days, roller skate had 4 wheels. And picked it up, put it on my right foot, and started pushing. A young white kid came up and said, "Those skates are mine." I couldn't say anything because I knew they weren't mine. He started kicking me in my shin. His big brother came up, did the same thing, kicking me in my right shin. And the father came up, did the same thing. I got arrested, and they took me to jail. In jail, they don't like to keep white kids around, black kids around, so they try to farm you out. They sent me to the diamond mines. I was a water boy at the diamond mines. When the miners came up from below, they have different levels, and I was at level number 7. So I had some pail of water in a cup, and I'd give it to the miner. He'll drink and then keep going up to another flight till you get above the surface. Anyway, I did that for a couple of weeks, and then a reverend called Reverend Trevor Huddlestone. He was the Archbishop of Johannesburg at that time. And he came by and trying to find kids who were halfway nice and decent and might be good to farm out other places. He picked me out and took me to the farm of the Van Dericks. The Van Dericks had a very nice plantation, and at that time I didn't know they were super rich. I stayed with the Van Dericks for a while and kind of enjoyed myself. And they decided to leave South Africa because the government of South Africa was kind of close to the Nazis at that time. So we went to Great Britain. It's called United Kingdom now. And I stayed with them in Great Britain. And one winter they got together and says, "Well, we want to go to South America where we have some holdings. It's warmer and everything." They had holdings in the 3 Guyanas, Dutch Guyana, French Guyana, and British Guyana. We went to all 3, but decided to settle down for the time being in British Guyana, which is called Guyana now. I stayed in the plantation house with them, and every week or so, a lady came up with a young boy next to her, around my age, and picked up the clothing, took it to her house, washed it, ironed it, folded it up, and brought it back. I got kind of close to the young man, so because he was my age, and we had fun together. The name was Charles's. And I started staying with them after a while and playing, enjoying myself. And the Van Dericks didn't mind. So when they got ready to go back to the United Kingdom, they said, "Do you want to come back right now?" I said, "No, I'm going to stay here and relax and enjoy myself with the Charleses." I stayed with the Charleses for a long while and eventually changed my name to Charles, but I kept the Dericks in front, so Deryck Charles. And the Van Dericks made sure they sent me to private schools, etc. After a while, I had to go back to the United Kingdom, and they sent me to Cambridge University, where I got a degree from Cambridge, one of the most prestigious schools in London at that time. Anyway, things got to be, well, I felt that white people did a whole lot for me at that time. It felt tremendous. And I started to reflect. On the other side, I remember in South Africa, a white guy driving his car, because only white guys would drive cars in those days in South Africa, knocked down a black kid, and the kid died. And all that guy had to do was to go to the nearest police station and pay 1 guilder and keep going on his way. And a guilder was just 60 cents.
My name is Patricia Brown Leak. I am the sister of H. Rap Brown and Ed Brown. We were born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Segregation was the law of the land in Louisiana. I knew what it was to see those white-only colored water fountain signs. I knew how it felt to walk to the back of the bus to go downtown. My brother Ed Brown, when he was a sophomore at Southern University in Baton Rouge, challenged that system. He and a group of 15 other students organized a sit-in demonstration in downtown Baton Rouge. Ed sat at a lunch counter at the Greyhound bus station. He was immediately arrested. The other students, as a result of their demonstration, were immediately arrested. We, the students, protested by marching on the Louisiana state capitol, which was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. In 1967, I was teaching in Greenville, Texas. It was my third year of teaching. Another black teacher and I were chosen to desegregate the Greenville public school system. I was a music teacher, she was a first grade teacher. It went without incident because it had been federally, the desegregation had been federally demanded. I want to share with you a little about my younger brother, H. Rap Brown. H. Rap Brown succeeded Stokely Carmichael as chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He was a household name in the 60s. As opposed to the older generation's outlook on desegregation, this younger generation said black power was the means of achieving. H. Rap Brown is known for the quotation, "Violence is as American as apple pie," that if this country don't come around, we're gonna burn it down. He continued in civil rights until he became a Muslim. With all the energy he had put into civil rights, he now put into being a Muslim. He became an imam, which is a minister, a minister. He founded a community in Atlanta called in the southeast, in the West End, and he had successfully started a mosque and a community there, and he had a little store. And that's the way he lived for many years. Where's H. Rap Brown now? He is incarcerated in a prison, a maximum prison. He is on 23-hour lockup. He was charged, and that has been for 10 years, and he is in prison for life. He was convicted of shooting an Atlanta policeman. The case is being contested. The case is being led by Ramsey Clark, former Attorney General of the United States, and other powerful lawyers. H. Rap Brown will be remembered because he was a legend during the 60s, and he approached desegregation in his own way.
Good morning. My name is Woody Grant. I was born and raised in Martinsville, Virginia. In 1949, 1950, 7 black men were accused of raping a white woman. And the trial, needless to say, did not last as long as most trials. The verdict was almost instant. They were all found guilty, and they were sentenced to die in the electric chair, and they did. One of them was a 17-year-old who was a student in my high school. That event in my life created a lot of intimidation for me whenever I was in the presence of white women or white girls. I remember as an orderly in the White Hospital that the candy stripers and the young white nurses were very sociable, vigorous in fact, and in their presence I felt a strong spirit of intimidation which lasted into my college years.
This is a story of Barbara Redfern. She was about 9 years old. It was 1955. She grew up in Baltimore. She was minding the younger children. There were 6 children. She was the next to eldest, and she was responsible for these children after school while her mother was working. The Afro-American newspaper was brought to the home, and one of the children showed a picture to Barbara, and she saw this thing in this picture that it upset her so much that she just got so excited. She started running, and she started running, and she started running, and she ran out of the house, and she was running and running, and then she realized that the other children were following her. Well, she knew she had to be responsible. She knew that she had to get calm because she had to take care of the younger children. But inside, she was quaking. She wanted so much for her mother to come home. And finally, she heard the key in the door. But before that, she started telling jokes just to make everybody relax. Calm down. So she's telling one joke after the other and, just trying to make everything light. And when she hears that key in the door, her mother comes in. She runs to her mother. She places her arms around her mother, and she starts to cry. Now, when Barbara came to this project, the first day, Miss Sandra Abbott brought a book that is a companion to the exhibit for all the world to see. And there was a picture of the thing that Barbara had seen in the Afro-American. And that thing was Emmett Till.
Hello, my name is John Billy. Coming up through segregation and all the bad things in my life, but it was one word that I can tell you packs a heavy load in my life, and that word is Jewish. Jewish. I entitled to my story, John Early World and Self-History. When I was 12 years old until I was 17 years old, I worked in this toy store in East Baltimore. This man who hired me, a Jewish fellow by the name of Mr. Morris Freed, someone is a mentor, is a father figure, someone I will never forget long as I live. He gave me the knowledge of being a young man. He gave me the knowledge of raising myself as a respectable person. Mr. Morris Freed gave me my best Christmas I had when I was a young man. And that Christmas was, he gave me a brand new two-wheel bicycle, something I will never, ever forget. In my neighborhood growing up, excuse me, as a black kid, you didn't get no two-wheel brand new bicycle. So what? I was the best popular person in my neighborhood because I had a brand new bicycle. And that's something I will always cherish. I love that bicycle. I praise that bicycle. That bicycle was stolen from me 3 times. I gotten it back 2 times. The 3rd time, I went east, north, south, west, couldn't find that bicycle nowhere. So I just gave up. I think it must have been an out-of-town job. But when one thing happened bad, always something good will follow. And that good thing was, Mr. Morris Freed, customer, asked me to do him a favor. And I did this favor, and he asked me, do you like to play music? I say, sure, I always wanted to. So he said, you come around next week, and I had my teacher teach you a couple chords. So that 1 week turned into 3 years of free music, playing music, which I will carry right to today as a professional musician. I put my family up. I paid for my home. Why? Because I was a musician who was given the opportunity freely, 3 years of free music by this gentleman, a Jewish fellow by the name, Mr. Larry London, biggest music school in East Coast. That's something I will never forget. And while I was at the Larry London School, excuse me, we did a concert at the old Emerson Hotel in Baltimore City. This hotel was segregated. No blacks could eat there. No blacks could sleep there. Not even work there. So I did this concert with these 12 other young white kids. I was the only black there. But after the concert, all the kids' mother and father hugged them, gave them flowers. My parents wasn't there. I could never understand this, why my parents wasn't there, because blacks wasn't allowed in the Emerson Hotel. And I realized that. And after that, I thought, this 14-year-old kid who played at the Emerson Hotel where no blacks was allowed, what I did, I integrated this hotel. Nobody say anything about it. It was a hush-hush thing. But after a couple months, I don't know, the old Emerson Hotel was torn down. I just figured they must found out. That's my story. John, early world, and free in self-history. Thank you.
When I finished college in Maryland, people of color were not allowed to go to any universities in Maryland to get an advanced degree, such as a doctorate or a master's. Maryland was willing to pay for us to go to any school anywhere in the United States we wanted to go, pay your tuition and even give you a stipend. So I looked on the map to see how far I could go and still be in the United States. And it was California. I wish it had been Hawaii. But nevertheless, I drove alone to California. And at that time, people of color couldn't stay in the hotels, nor could we eat in the restaurants. But Ebony magazine put out a booklet where you could find places to eat in the colored sections or places to sleep. But they were off the road, and I needed to make time to get to school on time. So I would go to the gasoline stations and fill up and ask if I could sleep under their lights and freshen up in their restrooms, and they said yes. And I would go to the grocery stores and buy bread and whatever else I wanted to eat with mayonnaise, and that would be how I fed myself. The trip took 3.5 days. As you traveled along at that time, there were signs saying, last gasoline for the next 125 miles. And so, of course, you would fill up. And I remember seeing my first pine tree in Needles, California, palm tree. And so I went on and I saw signs saying, keep alert, dust storms for the next 35 miles. Keep your lights on, do not leave the road. So finally I did arrive in California on the campus of UCLA, and I was at a dormitory called Twin Pines. The other dormitory was Myra Hershey Hall on Hillgard Avenue. But when I arrived, the girls were upset. They didn't know that my school was a black school, and they didn't know that I was black. And they were afraid because the lease said no Negroes or Indians could live in that building, or they would lose their lease in California. Well, I was successful that year. The next year when I came back, unfortunately, the lady had died. So I was able to stay there and finish my work and get my degree.
In April 1958, I received a very nasty letter from the Department of Defense. They instructed me to report to Fort Holabird, Maryland, for my pre-induction physical into the United States military. The examination went without a hitch. The only thing was there were 28 young men being examined. I was the only black. As we were leaving Fort Holabird, we were issued meal tickets for a meal at a local restaurant here in Baltimore called Nedick's downtown. As we left the bus, walked into the restaurant, we were met at the door by the white female waitress who directed us to a flight of stairs that led down. I think we all knew we were headed for the basement. It was obvious because you could smell the stagnant water, the sour mop, and the burned grease. The tables were spread, just waiting for us. We each took a menu and sat. One of the guys I had met on the bus came to me and he said, "Bob, these guys are not mad with you. They just don't want to be down here either." And I could feel every eye on me. At any rate, the guys said, "We have a plan. Order everything you can get free. Food, beverage, whatever it is, order it, but nobody eats it. We asked for a quantity of waxed paper. The waitress was really happy about this, thinking we were going to each take our food with us. We took the waxed paper, put a layer over the food on the plate, did the same to the glass. You quickly invert it and pull away the wax paper, leaving this mess on the table. After which we shook hands, walked up the stairs to the front door. When we got at the door, we shook hands again and went our separate ways.
Oh, good old 50s. Who remember the good 50s and the doo-wop days? Those days, sure, there was segregation, integration, all the negative things, but also there was the positive things that happened. On a positive note, I'd like to share with you. I used to sing with a doo-wop group from Baltimore, East Baltimore, recording group called the Honey Boys. The Honey Boy was well known throughout around Baltimore. Also, they was well liked. We had received an invitation for this little small segregated social club in East Baltimore. So we took the job. We was there at 8 o'clock. We did our couple of songs. So after the song was over, we standing around. Some young kid came over to me and patted me on my shoulder. What he did, he gave me a note. And I looked at the note, it said, "I'd like to dance with you." I was so startled. We was only black in this segregated place. No, this couldn't happen right here. So what I did, who sent this note? So he in turn showed me these two girls over in the corner. Both had black dresses, both had blonde hair, both beautiful Caucasian girls. So I walked over to her. The first one I got near, I extended my arm, and we started dancing. And it was like, this is not real. So while we were dancing, I told her, "My name is John Billy. I received your note. I'm very pleased." She in turn said, "Well, I didn't send the note." She said, "My girlfriend sent the note." And at that time, I thought, whoa, 2 for 1. Okay. But anyway, I said, "I will dance with your girlfriend if I finish with you." So she raised up on me, looked me in my eyes, and said, "No, you don't have to dance with her." And at that moment, something went through my body, a thrill, a sensation I felt at that moment. In other words, she rocked my world right there. I'm standing, I'm dancing, the sweet perfume, the song was playing, you send me, and she was sending me. So I just felt, Shirley, just give me one chance, because I'm not afraid of a mixed romance. My point in the story is, in this little segregated place where everybody, you say blacks couldn't come, you know, I'm saying, in this little place, the man who invited us there, he was a Jewish fella. The girl who wrote the note I was supposed to dance with in the first place, she also was a Jewish girl. And the girl, the beautiful girl that I danced with, who rocked my world, she was Irish. We was there, the 4 boys was there. We was colored, Negro. Well, I'm still looking for my identity. But the point is, I don't care who's sitting next to you. You don't know what they are. I'm saying, can we all get along? You know, first of all, who gave me that song to sing that first night? Who placed those two beautiful women there for me to choose from, to dance with? Who placed them two Jewish people there? Thank you very much. Is the reason why I met my wife today, because of them. Who did this? Nobody but God. He also made us a little small love boat, built for two. And I named it Flavor. So we sailing. Flavor is a mixture, and the ingredients are two words that were sent down from the heavens: faith and love. That's how we won a victory over racism 56 years ago. 54 of those years, I had been married to my wife, Shirley Billy. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shirley Billy, and I'm married to John Billy. And my story begins on June the 7th, 1956. And I gave birth to our first child in Johns Hopkins Hospital. I thought this was going to be the most beautiful, happiest day of my life, but it started to go downhill right away. There was confusion at the hospital about where they should put me. Should I be in the white ward or the Negro ward? And it was up and down. But finally, it didn't matter to me because I had just had a beautiful child. Now, the next day, they took me into a private room to tell me that my child had been removed from the hospital and taken to St. Elizabeth's orphanage without my knowledge and without my consent. And I was just devastated. I mean, how could they do this? What was going on? I didn't even know. And then I was told there was a 275-year-old law in the state of Maryland that said any white woman that gave birth to a child fathered by a Negro has committed a crime, punishable by 5 years in jail. So now I got my child to worry about, and then am I going to go to jail? You know, I was just, it was like it wasn't real. So I left the hospital. When I left the hospital, I went home and just to wait and see how this was going to play out. So the state's attorney's office did indict me. And they set a trial date. And about 4 weeks later, the police came to my house 4 o'clock in the morning and arrested me. They had a warrant for my address. And they took me to the Pine Street Women's Jail downtown. And I stayed there for a while. Then my mother got my bail. I had to get bail, had to get a lawyer. And I mean, it was just a mess. I couldn't even think. So finally, the trial did come up, and the ACLU did come to my defense. They sent 2 lawyers to help with my lawyer as friends of the court. And as a result, the case was thrown out because it was considered unconstitutional to have a law that only affected one person, the white woman. Didn't affect the black woman, the black man, the white man, just the white woman. So that came out all right. So now I had to concentrate on getting my son back. But I was told that I would have to have a job, have a place to live, and be married. I mean, see, in 1956, they could do that. So I thought, well, I'm going to start right away. I got a couple of very good jobs, but they kept letting me go because my case was in the Sun papers, the News American, the Afro, and after I'd be there about 3 weeks, they'd call me in and say, "Is this you?" And I would say yes, and They say, well, we'll have to let you go. I mean, they didn't hide anything. This is why we're letting you go. But finally, I did luck up. A friend of mine that worked in liquor distributors got me a job in the office there. And I told them up front, and they hired me. And it turned out to be a very good job. So that was one down. Then John mysteriously got drafted into the Army. They weren't drafting men in 1956. It was peacetime, and it just wasn't heard of. But he got drafted, and finally, when he came home, I had found out that the only place we could get married, because in Maryland, that was also against the law, in Washington, D.C. So we went there, and we got a license, and the next time he came home on leave, we went back over there and got married. And we also found a place to live. Well, now I had everything. And when I tried to get my son back, I was told he was on his way to being adopted in North Carolina or South Carolina or somewhere. But anyway, it ended well. We finally were able to take him home. And, but it was a real terrible, terrible time. But it worked out. But this whole thing, from start to finish, took almost 2 years. And that's my story.
This is another story from Barbara Redfern. It was 1967. The newspaper ad said, "Brand new French provincial sofa, $299. Well, Barbara knew that her mama wanted a beautiful new sofa, and she and her sister were working at that time and could afford it. At that price, they did. So they went down, they got that sofa, and Mama was so happy, she was glowing. Gave them a lot of joy. But when the bill came, the bill said $499. And Barbara said, "No way, no way." And she called up and said, what are you doing? It said $299. And they said, "Well, we can't do anything about it." And she says, "Well, I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to go down to the store and speak to the owner." So she goes with the ad, and she brings her 12-year-old brother with her, and she speaks to the owner, and she says, "This is false advertising." And the owner is looking at them, and he's listening, and then he says to her younger brother, and he says, "Well, are you happy?" And the younger brother said, "Yes, I'm happy." And so then the manager said, "Well, you can have it at the lower price." So that empowered Barbara no end. Her father would say,
You must stand. I raised you to stand.
"When a wrong has been done, I ask myself, can I stand? I hear my father telling me,
On my word, you go with this. Stand.
Some I didn't win. I realized it wasn't the winning. It was that Barbara could take a stand.
We spent our first anniversary in federal court. We had several cases against the Board of Education of Harford County to desegregate the schools for all students and teachers, and to assign black teachers as principals in the central office. We won with Mrs. Juanita Jackson Mitchell. Before we went to the United States Peace Corps to teach in West Africa, I decided I would go to Mississippi. At that time, they had the freedom schools. They were registering voters and doing other things that Bob Moses had set up to do. While there, we heard of some friends of ours, Mickey Schreiner, Jimmy Chaney, and Andy Goodman. Mickey and Andy were Jewish. Jimmy was a Negro. And Mickey was a friend of mine. We had been Freedom Riders together. We were always told to call in when we were absent. Now, I had driven to Jackson, Mississippi alone, would not go anywhere near Georgia at that time, and would not tell people where I was going. As I was driving, I'd stop only to get gasoline, because if you told where you were going, you may end up missing. People did not like civil rights workers, and many were missing. Well, I finally did arrive, and I went to the police station to ask how to find Tougaloo College, which of course was our base. And the policemen looked at each other and looked at me, because that was a no-no. The police were against civil rights workers. But nevertheless, I got to Tougaloo College, and I was completely exhausted after 28 hours of driving nonstop, and I fell into a bed in the college in one of the dorms, slept until the next day. When I woke up, I went outside and saw people being taught how to defend yourselves. And of course, you had to shield your head and of course get in a fetal position so your stomach wouldn't be hit. Well, and you had to also write ahead and give them the names of your newspaper. So if you came up missing, they could notify the newspaper in your town and your parents that you were missing, which often happened. In the meantime, a young man, Andy Goodman, had just gotten there from Kent College at our office on Lynch Street. And he asked Mickey if he could go with him. A church had been burned down. 20 churches in all were burned down that summer, 1964. And Mickey and Jimmy said yes. And so they went along. Unfortunately, they went on the wrong road, and they were arrested. We were told to drive 10 miles below the speed limit. If it was 40, you drove 30. But nevertheless, they were jailed, then released, and then followed. This is Philadelphia, Mississippi. Well, it turned out that the boys were missing, and President Johnson sent the Seabees down to locate the boys. Well, they dragged the rivers, the Tallahatchie River and the Pearl River. They found many bodies, but they didn't find the boys. So finally, the FBI paid a Klansman $25,000 for information, and he let them know, the FBI, that the boys had been killed, shot to death, and were buried in a dam. And that morning, when we got ready to go to the Freedom School to teach, we saw on the news, on the TV, they were digging in the dam, and they saw a boot of one of the boys. And of course, that was a very sad day for us. I went with a friend of mine at that time, Fannie Lou, to try to encourage the people in Mississippi and other towns. And at that time, one of the churches that had been burned down, we put a chair on top of the church and on top of the charred ruins, and a lady was singing, "Freedom is a constant struggle." Now, one of the boys, Mickey, had been shot outright, we were told. The deputy, the sheriff and 19 of their deputies had asked him who he was, and he said yes, and they said, "Oh, you're that nigger lover," and they shot him immediately, we were told, because the Klansman was a part of this. Then Jimmy was tied to a tree and beaten with chains, and Andy was also shot. When the doctors examined them, the autopsy, they found that every bone in Jimmy Chaney's body had been crushed. And Andy apparently was not quite dead because they found soil clenched in his hand, thinking perhaps he was trying to dig his way out.
In 1957, I was a sophomore at Virginia Union University. So one morning while sitting in my humanities class, the president of our university, Dr. Samuel DeWitt Proctor, walked in with a stranger who he introduced to us as Dr. Martin Luther King. Dr. King was there to give us information that we read in the paper, but to personalize it. His home had been bombed, and his basic reason for being with us was to talk about a strategy that he had studied and was trying to get black people to utilize. And doing his master's degree, his thesis was based on the life of Mahatma Gandhi, who had fought ethnocentrism in India against the United Kingdom using what he called passive resistance. And of course, when Dr. King began to talk to us about not hitting back, passively resisting things, it did not go down real well. Because we were always taught that if someone hits you, you have the right to hit them back. Well, passive resistance is a direct action which says, do not hit back. And over several lectures, we were then influenced that this is indeed a way that we can fight Jim Crow, racism.
Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm a witness. I was there. This I remember. The students from Southern University in my sleepy Louisiana town caught the spirit of freedom and wouldn't be turned around. 16 courageous students, my brother Ed being one, sick and tired of unlawful laws, knew the time had come. Our leaders gave spirited speeches. We sung freedom songs, then prepared to march to the Capitol to redress laws of the South that were wrong. But just before that fateful day, when all of Louisiana stood still, my brother Ed and others sat at a lunch counter against the white man's will. At the appointed time on that day, our classrooms emptied fast. When the student leaders called, we boarded yellow school buses, and some walked en masse. 2,000 strong, we black students marched on the Louisiana Capitol that day. We were met with police dogs attacking and fire hoses blasting. Surprised and befuddled, we prayed. With new courage, we rose from our knees and sang. Freedom's name is mighty sweet. Soon one day we're gonna meet. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on. Hold on. That day, the whole world witnessed the white man's inhumanity to man and realized what young blacks were willing to do for freedom in this land. I want to pass on what I remember, and please remember what I say. The road to our civil rights has been long, cruel, and hard. Sacrifices, blood, pain, and death paved the path we trod. You see, I remember the extraordinary price for my children to eat at McDonald's today. For me to sit at the front of the bus today. For my children to get an equal education today, even to drink from a water fountain. Embrace this remarkable history and never forget the price that was paid. I'm a witness. I was there. This I remember.
I too saw that picture of Emmett Till that Barbara Redford saw. I opened the middle page of Jet magazine, and there it was. Face tore up, bloody and everything. I couldn't handle it. I couldn't believe that this happened in a country that I just migrated to and I loved, home of the free and the brave. Couldn't believe it. Anyway, I figured I'd join some kind of a group that'll take some action. So at first I joined CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. And we started to do some things on our own. Then I joined the Freedom Riders. I don't know if any of you remember the Freedom Riders. We hired buses, drove down south and tried to integrate public facilities. We went through South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and we ended up in Mississippi. We got arrested and put into a room, not a jail, but a room about 4 times the size of the bathroom outside. It's about 30 or 40 of us. We wanted to use the facilities, and the jailers told us, you want to do something? Urinate in the corner. You want to go to the bathroom? Do wherever you can. I just couldn't believe that men could be so inhuman to other men. It was beginning to get to me. Anyway, the worst thing that happened is one of the young ladies had a problem with her monthlies, and it became very obvious. And she didn't know what to do, so we asked the jailer again. He turned to us and said, "You're outside agitators. You should be in your own state, your own area, your own city, and whatever, doing what you have to do. You shouldn't be here." And left us alone. So we formed a ring around the young lady, facing outwards, and one of the young men took his undershirt and gave it to her, and she took care of her business. It was very, very painful. I said, when I get back home, I'll have to do something else. Perhaps push Mississippi off the face of the map. I don't know. I'm going to have to do something else. When I get back to New York, that's where I used to live, in New York City. And after work, I used to take the subway to 125th Street and walk across 125th Street to go to Columbia University. I was attending theological seminary then. And at the corner of 125th and 7th Avenue, there was a big hotel called Hotel Teresa. If you remember it, that's where Fidel Castro stayed when they came to talk to the United Nations. Anyway, Malcolm X used to be there right in the corner every evening, preaching, talking, giving advice, especially advice to defend yourself. Didn't pay much attention at first, but after passing there for weeks and weeks on end, I stopped and started listening. Then I decided a whole lot of what he was saying made sense. So after a while, I joined Malcolm's group.
As a result of my experiences in the civil rights movement, I developed a great deal of confidence and the ability to perceive matters in an understanding way. As a result, I was selected to become part of a speakers bureau, a group of college kids, basically black males, to travel into the north of Virginia, speaking to college students, basically white students, about our experiences in Richmond, Virginia, about our planning, all of the mechanisms we operated in, prepared for, as we decided to demonstrate, to fight Jim Crow. I remember going into an all-girls college in Northern Virginia, and we began to share with them again the things that we had done and the reasons why. And during the Q&A period, a young man asked the question. He said, or he made the comment, he said, "Aren't you here to date white girls?" And we said, "No, we're here to be your brother, not your brother-in-law." A culturally shocked male was he. As a result, again, of our continued efforts throughout Richmond and other areas in the state, we, one Saturday morning, 200 students strong, decided to march downtown Richmond to the business district. And we sat in every lunch counter, department mezzanine, anywhere where there was an eating facility. We sat in. Previously segregated areas is what I'm talking about. Naturally, we were not served. We were treated dismally. We were spat on. Policemen, after we got outside and began picketing the places, began to let dogs come near us, police dogs come near us, just because we were articulating a position that we were citizens too. We had equal rights. You advertise to the public, we are public. We are therefore able to eat in your facility. As a result, 34 of us were arrested. We became what was called the Richmond 34. We picketed those stores in those downtown district areas for at least 18 months. Finally, we were advised to look at the economics of what we were doing. We were able to get names of all of the credit card holders. You know, at that time, the credit cards were metal. And we asked people to send their credit cards, credit plates to us. So one bright Saturday morning again, we marched into the office of the president of the Chamber of Commerce with 6 shopping bags filled with charge plates. Needless to say, we got our way after that.
In 1968, I was working for Life magazine, staff photographer. I was sent to Washington, D.C. My assignment was to capture the Poor People's Campaign. So for 6 weeks, I lived in Resurrection City. One particular morning, we were going out to demonstrate. We were at the Department of Justice. Several hundred people gathered around, milling about the streets. On the curb, there was one black guy, one Afro-American. He was not with the group, but he stood there and he raised his right arm and hand and he shouted, "Black power!" Black power! He was immediately wrestled to the ground and the police started to beat him. Some of the folk in the crowd turned, walking away, running. In my haste to get a photograph of what was going on, I dropped my camera bag. As I picked it up, I turned. The police are coming towards me. Not necessarily at me, but towards me. I turned also to run, to get out of harm's way. And as I turned to the rear, I saw faces, men, women, children, every race, every age, some in wheelchairs, some on crutches. And they, all together and individually, shouted to me, "Don't leave us! Tell our story! We got your back!" As I turned again towards the onrushing crowd and the police were getting closer. It was then that I realized that I have the power. If they are going to beat me, kill me, or whatever they're going to do, I am not going to run. I'm going to show the world who they are. Suddenly, the police stopped in their tracks. Not because of me, necessarily, although I did have them on record, but there were about 300 people behind, and they knew they couldn't beat them all. I took pictures then, I still take pictures.
It was Sunday, July 7th, 1963. My husband said, let's take the boys and go canoeing. We had 3 sons. I said, no, instead of that, let's take the boys and go get arrested at Gwen Oak Park. The previous July 4th, there had been a big demonstration there protesting the Maryland law that said owners could keep out whoever they wanted. No black people could go to Gwen Oak Park. There'd been 283 people arrested that day. So I thought, well, let's get in the crowd. My husband said, I'm not sure I really agree with demonstrations. And I said, well, I'm not sure I'm sure either, but while we're deciding, let's go get arrested. So we piled the kids into the car and we drove to Gwen Oak Park. There were many people outside the park. And if you wanted to protest outside, you could carry a banner, and that was fine. If you wanted to go into the park and you were white, like we were, we could go in. But if you were black, no, you couldn't get arrested. Well, if you're white and want to get arrested, then you have to be paired up with somebody black and go in together. The minute you step over the property line, the owner's standing there and says, arrest them. So we were surrounded by policemen. The black couple were put in a bus, and we were put in a car, I guess, because we had the children. But anyway, I've often thought since then that this whole thing was about black people and laws against them. And yet, nobody was paying any attention to them. They were, probably because of the children. The black couple, I just never, I don't even remember their names, but we got lots of attention because, I guess because of the children, pictures in the papers and all of that. But the black couple, I never knew about again. But so there we are in the armory. The jails were already full. We were in the armory waiting to be processed, to be fingerprints, mugshots. And I noticed that the last people to be processed were the few families that had brought their children. We being punished for bringing our children. Well, it was no punishment for my kids because I was holding my 5-month-old baby. He couldn't care where he was. The older boys, 6 and 8, people were passing in hot dogs, hamburgers, ice cream, candy, and they could stay up till the middle of the night. I mean, what more could you ask for? But anyway, finally, we were processed, and we were released on our own recognizance. And when the case came to trial, the law had been changed. I've often thought it was great what we did, but subjecting my children to that danger, we've heard about the violence, and was that a wise thing to do? But I've decided yes, even though maybe it wasn't the safest thing. I gave my children a great gift. They know that they took part in getting rid of an evil law. And so Gwen Oak Park was integrated. The first day of integration, I think, was August the 28th. I wasn't there because I was in Washington, D.C.
The year was 1963, August the 28th. It had been a very good year for me, and should I say, it had been a banner year for the Brown household. I had recently achieved my goal of finishing college and was in less than a week looking forward to my first teaching job in Jonesville, Louisiana. For this nation, it had been another long, hot summer with thick overtones of racial tension and unrest in the inner city. On that day, the drum major for peace, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., delivered a powerful, unforgettable speech which articulated eloquently a new vision for this country. The I Have a Dream speech has gone down in history as one of the greatest speeches ever delivered. I remember it well. The Brown household gathered in the living room around the black and white TV for the occasion. At the time, we did not know the magnitude or the significance of the march. All we knew was that my big brother, Ed, a student at Howard University, was one of the organizers for the march and had been working energetically with people like Bayard Rustin to make the march a reality and involve youth. It was a beautiful sight. A multitude of black and whites walking shoulder to shoulder, united in purpose. Then the program began to unfold. The tone was set by Mahalia Jackson's rendition of an old-time spiritual, Precious Lord. This took me to a new realm. By the time Dr. King took the podium, I was transfixed, and the nation stood still. I pondered what manner of man as he shared his dream with us. I think that this theme reverberated in the hearts, minds, and souls of every human being in this nation who witnessed this event. For me, it was for me, America's greatest national moment. We shall